of the Elephant Page New Used and Rare Books is very pleased to welcome Hamilton Davis, author of Blocking Justice, who's going to talk about the Paul Lawrence case 50 years ago this year.
Okay. Wow. Thank you very much for inviting me. I want to thank Donna for setting this whole thing up, and I'm now seeing actually names that I've heard for years, and many of whom I've dealt with in the past. So what I'm going to do is, and this book is obviously very old. Its direct effect on St. Albans is not directly obvious anymore today. But I thought I would just tell you a little bit about it. But mainly I want to offer. So what I'm going to do is this, if it's okay. I'm going to talk a maximum of 40 minutes. If it seems right, I'm going to get to 30. Okay, and then the rest of my time. I've got a hard stop at 7:15. What I really would like to do is hear from you guys, hear your questions, what you're curious about, where you are, what you wonder about. Let me just tell you first. I wanted to start out first by telling you you've all read the book, and the truth is, I just read the book myself last week. I wrote that book, and then I was totally drained, and I never read it again. It's not that I forgot it, it's just that I didn't actually read it. And anyway, just read, and I thought it was pretty good. Anyway, it was, I think it was, but it was serendipity. It was a total accident that the book was written, and I'll just tell you a little bit about that. I began my career I was a better newspaper journalist at that point of my whole career. I was 25 years old when I got out of the Army, and I started, and I learned my trade at the Providence Journal, which is still, well, all newspapers are gone now, not completely, but mostly, but it was one of the best small papers in the country, and I learned my trade there. But so in any event, I worked there for 10 years, and then I went to the Gannett. I went to Gannett News Service, Washington Bureau. Okay, and then Gannett, I worked there a little bit, and then Gannett sent me to open a New York City bureau in the mid-1970s, when New York was coming completely unstuck. The headline from that era was in the New York Daily News because New York was going broke, and Gerald Ford, the new president who replaced Richard Nixon, I covered the whole Nixon administration, and said refused to help at all. And the headline in the New York Daily News was "Ford the City Dropped Dead," and so right about that time I was very anxious to get back to Vermont. And so what happened was that the Paul Lawrence case broke then. I believe it was right around 1974, 1975, and I read the New York Times cover to cover every day, and so I got the New York Times. I was living in Brooklyn. I got the New York Times. There's a great story on the front page, great story. Some crazy cop had been wreaking havoc in Vermont, okay, and it was just the most terrible thing, and it was written by a guy who was a friend of mine, John Kiffner, who was a very good foreign correspondent and had come back to New York, foreign correspondent for the New York Times. And so I read the story, and there it is. I thought, and it really rang a bell with me, because during the Lawrence era, I was there. I was managing editor of the Burlington Free Press at that time. I knew nothing. I knew jack about it. It's one of the reasons I left. I left editing because editors are really ignorant. It's the reporters that know what's going on. Anyway, so what happened was that as soon as that story appeared, like that morning in the New York Times, a literary agent who was from someplace in eastern Vermont, Bethel or someplace like that, but he was working as a literary agent in New York City, and he called a friend of his who he knew had been editor of Vermont Life, And he said, and so he called up this friend of his, and he said, who could write this book? And so this guy told him, he said, well, the best person that I know to write the book is Candace Page. She was a reporter at the Burlington Free Press. She was my wife, okay? Anyway, she hated the idea. She wanted nothing to do with, but so she told this guy, his name was Louis Chambers, so she told him, I know just the person you want to call. My phone rings. Have you read who is it? Yeah, my name is Davis. Have you read the New York Times? Have you read the New York Times story on Paul Lawrence in Vermont? And I said, yeah. I said, it was amazing. It was an amazing story. Just read that thing this morning. He said, would you write a book about it? I said, excuse me? He said, would you write a book about it? And I said, I've never written a book. I don't have any idea how to do that. And he said, well, would you like to do it? And I said, the fact was that I was desperate at that point to get back. I really wanted to come back to Vermont. So I said, yes, I'll do it. How do I do it? I had no idea. I said, so what do I do? He said, okay, here's what you have to do. He said, you have to write a treatment. I said, I don't know what a treatment is. He said, well, a treatment is just it can be 5, 6, 7 printed, typewritten pages, and it says, here's the idea, here's the story, here's what the book is about, okay? Here's who might read the book. Oh, those Joe and Sally, and here's how I would go about doing the book, okay, and sort of laying out how you would approach it, and the whole thing gets smashed together and gets to be, 10, 15, 20 pages, and then the literary agent takes that treatment and he starts peddling it to book publishers all over, including Crown Press, the big New York publisher. And he said, so I just write this treatment, I said? He said, yep. I said, okay. And so that was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And I grew up as a journalist, okay? I can write front page story in 8 minutes. If that's 8 minutes is what I've got. If it's 20 minutes, that's what I'll use. If it's an hour and a half, I'll take that. If it's 2 days, I'll take that, okay? So anyway, he had told me what to do. I had a story by one of the best newspaper reporters in the country just sitting there. It was really an outline. It was just the outline of it, who he was, how it went, the whole deal went down. It was probably 800 words, 900, but it was 900 professional words ready done. I said, mechanical typewriter, I'm really old, okay? So I called him about 2 hours later, and I said, what do you want me to do with this? He said, what? I said, what do you want me to do with this treatment? He said, you finished this treatment? I said, yeah. And he said, well, can you get it? I said, where are you? He said, my office is on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. I said, okay, and I went over and I gave him the thing, and he said, thanks very much. Anyway, he called me up the next day. He said, we've got a contract. They'll pay you $5,000 to write the book. They want it done in 3 months, from start to finish, okay? And we're ready to go. And so I said, okay. And I went up, got all my, living in Brooklyn. I took all my stuff, threw it in my car, drove to Vermont. And the next day, I was headed for St. Albans. Anyway, so my point is, it was just luck. What a guy named Sig Moglen was a big-time editor for that. But he said my agent told me later was, he bought the book because when he talked to Moglen, okay, he said he'd never seen anybody write a treatment in 2 hours. And from start, in any event, so I got the thing, and that was it. And but it was a pure accident. It was just luck. And so in any event, that's how the book came about. It was an accident, and I had never written a book, and so I started. Anyway, that got me to Vermont. When I came to Vermont, when I came to St. Albans. When I came to St. Albans, then I just started talking to everybody, and it was a different era then. You could call people up and they'd talk to you. Not everybody, but that was routine, whether it was government or politics. I mean, if I wanted to call up Randy Brock at 10 o'clock at night, because he's a state senator who lives in Swanton, then he'll probably answer the phone. Will he answer the phone today? I doubt it, okay? And so in any event, so what I found when I got here was I knew the outline of the story, and the whole question in trying to write the book was whether you could get it done enough so that you get enough detail. You had to know the facts and all the traffic, the legal issues, the practical issues, the social issues, and the political issues. But what you had to do was to figure it out, how to present it to the public. Okay, and that was the first time I did anything. I never did anything like this before at that point. Okay, I was, I think, 40 years old, something like that. But I've written all the stuff I'd written was in newspapers. Now I'd written a ton of that, an ocean of that. My wife is still demanding I get it out of my garage, and so one of the things I did was I used the procedure I used. I just sort of found myself, but it now has a name. The methodology I used was something called creative nonfiction. It's where it's not fiction. Anybody, I'll give you money. Find an error in here, any error. Okay, I hate errors. Okay, and so what you've got to do is but when you write it, okay, it needs to have. You can, if you're writing 800 words about some political story or automobile accident on I-89 or whatever, okay, what you can do is you can just stack facts up, okay, the facts. This happened and this happened. It's, like as they used to say about history, it's one damn thing after another. You just stack it up, okay, and you can do that for about, you can do that for about 700 to 800 words max. And then guess what the reader is doing? Out the door. You can leave it there, but he's gone. The reader is gone. And so I use creative nonfiction as a way to get narrative drive into the book. And the evidence for it, perversely, came in later when I found that people, reviewers and everybody else, including people that should have known better, this book has been described as a novel. It's not a novel, as I say. There's a few errors in here. I'm not telling you. No way I'm telling you what they are. You find them, I'm betting against you. Anyway, so in any event, when I got to St. Albans, what I found the writing of the book sort of paralleled in a way. What happened in St. Albans. So what happened in St. Albans is that there was Lawrence, who was a classic villain, who still exists, who's still out there. There's not Lawrence. I think Lawrence is dead actually, but sons of Lawrence are out there still, or daughters of Lawrence are out there still. Anyway, so what I found was. But it's important to know that at the time, that the sort of ethos of the way that the press worked, the press still had, when I was writing this book, okay, was a big deal. People paid attention. Everybody read the newspapers. TV was coming on. There was no question about that. But in my life, I'm really a geezer. I'm older than you think. And so when I grew up and left my home to go to college I've never seen a TV set. It was 1954, and I never saw it. So anyway, but the value of it being in the press in those days, newspaper press in those days was very much bigger, 10 times bigger, 20 times bigger than TV news, okay? And even in that era, if you take something like Walter Cronkite, anybody remember Walter Cronkite? Yeah, okay. Let me just tell you, you think Walter Cronkite grew up on TV? Walter Cronkite was a great reporter for United Press International. Huntley and Brinkley, do you remember those two guys? Okay. They were all newspaper guys before, and one of the, it's now a perverse lament for me that those days are gone. There is no more newspaper press really at all. It's the it's the web and so forth. And once I got to St. Albans, basically what I found was very interesting. There were people there that I could instantly talk to, and one of the best and one of the most valuable to me, and one of a very, very small number of really solid players that never for an hour bought into Lawrence and never was tempted by Lawrence, is Jim Levy. As you probably most of you all probably know who Jim is. He was representing. There were others in the what you might call the St. Albans bar, St. Albans lawyers, and there were others but they didn't. Of the bar, okay. There must have been, I don't know, 7 or 8 guys that did most of the cases that came out of the Great St. Albans raid, but anyway, some people wouldn't talk at all. I couldn't talk to Judge Gregg. I couldn't talk to Lawrence, which I tried to do. Lawrence was in jail at that time, and somewhere down around Springfield, Vermont, a correctional center, and he would not talk to me. But in any event, one of the things was I was able to talk to so many people that nearly all the victims would talk to me. Then there were guys like Jim that would talk to me, but Jim wasn't the only ones. It was even people that were getting it wrong, like Kim Cheney, who was the Attorney General at the time. I could talk to virtually all the people, but not all of them. And that is, so what I did was I had told the publisher, I had told my agent, he said, "Can you write this book in 3 months?" Now, I'd never written a book. And even for what a veteran of a rewrite bank on a major newspaper, which is just writing at the highest speed possible, okay, 3 months is really fast, and I didn't make it. It took me 6. It took me 6 months to get it. But I think what I got when I got done, I think I captured most of it. I read it as I told Jim. I wrote that book and I finished it in 1977, and they published it in 1978. And it was like a 100-meter dash. It was like, just running it for 6 months. I just ran as hard as I could, frantically driving back and forth from an apartment in Burlington and up here, okay, and just talking to everybody that I could. And the reaction I got was basically the people really helped me, but they were tricky. I mean, and Jim may remember this. Once it had been in the Times, and I got the contract to write the book. Now, I wasn't the only one that read that story in the New York Times. All kinds of other writers came out of the woodwork. And so I ran into in City Hall, right here, one day, a guy that said he was going to do a TV thing about Paul Lawrence, but he was going to turn it around a little bit and make Lawrence the hero. I told that to Jim, and then I had to pick him up off the floor. And so, in any event, you guys have read the book, and many of you know a lot more about what actually went on here because you were here. In the rest of the state, there was a lot. It was huge interest also. Tom Salmon was the governor, okay, and he had wasn't really bad, but he hadn't gotten it right either, mainly because he assumed Kim Cheney was dealing with it. but Salmon, okay, one of the things that Salmon did was Salmon was a rival. He and Pat Leahy were both Democrats, okay, but Salmon was much older, and he was the governor, and Leahy was just a district attorney, a state's attorney, okay, in Chittenden County. And Leahy was a kid. He was like 33 years old, okay? Salmon was the governor, okay? But what was really happening was, in the sort of texture of the political life, Leahy is going right by Salmon. Right to the point where, in 1974, Leahy fakes out George Aiken, gets a Democratic nomination, wins by an eyelash. He wins. So now he's a U.S. senator. Okay, and when I was working, Salmon was very concerned because Leahy was getting so much credit for the work he'd done to trap Lawrence that Salmon was furious, and but he would talk to me. I could talk to Salmon all that I wanted. One of the interesting things that I can't actually remember what I put in the book, but I think it's important. One of the things that was going on was that Pat Leahy got a lot of credit here, and it's not that he didn't deserve it, but the main work of catching Lawrence, the actual breakthrough to catch which is hard to do. The whole atmosphere in St. Albans, worse than anywhere else, as you guys know, with the establishment, the police, the local officials, the Mike McGinn, is that his name? In any way, everything was against it. So what happened was just to reiterate the book, what happened was that the Leahy was running hard, okay, for the George Aiken Senate seat, running really hard. So he turned his office, basically, operation over to his deputy, Frank Murray, a young lawyer, okay? And then at the same time, there was a kid that came out of Brooklyn, New York, I think it was Brooklyn, named Kevin Bradley. He was 21 years old. He was a Boy Scout, but he was a cop, and his family had a lot of cops in it, and he did not go to college, but he's a very smart guy, and he had come in and worked for the Burlington Police Department, and the Burlington cops had assigned Bradley to be Lawrence's partner in drug buys in Burlington. Now, if you remember the book, the drug buys were all bad and so forth, but you can't compare the Burlington PD to a heavy like New York City PD, NYPD, LAPD, Denver PD. No, I mean those places are 10 to 15 or 20 times bigger than Vermont. But they were pretty good. They were the best in Vermont, and they were a lot better than the state police. And so anyway, the long and the short of it was that it was not too hard to track down where this whole thing, what had happened. I had talked to lawyers, I talked to nearly all the defense lawyers. They all, explained their problems with Lawrence, and they explained what they had done and how bad it was. And then in the last third of the book, which is if you, I don't know if you feel this way about it, but it certainly felt that way to me. In the last third of the book, was when I was trying to find out how Lawrence did it. There was no question about he did it, okay? But there was mysteries. Where would this guy get? He was buying heavy drugs, and the heavy drugs didn't exist in Vermont at all. I mean, no. There was no heroin, there was no cocaine, and today it would be fentanyl and stuff like that. What there was you can now grass is legal, and huge numbers of kids were just smoking grass. But nobody knew. But when Lawrence got a hold of him and got him in front of a jury, he's heroin, cocaine, and that was what sort of blew everybody's minds. So in any event, one of the things that carried the whole last third of the book was really, it was just really reporting for me. I didn't find out Tom Salmon named a very smart guy named Bob Ginsberg as St. Johnsbury lawyer. I don't know whether Randy knows him, but the guy is, I knew him a little bit, and he was a seriously heavy-duty guy. And he figured out that where the drugs were coming from, it was coming from a technician at the New York State Police drug lab. And so that's really how the whole book went together. I'd like to say, so that's how it happened, and that's what and basically that's all I know about it. Everybody in this room, I suspect, knows much more intimately and in much more detail exactly how this whole Lawrence era was born, how it really worked out, and what the aftermath was, much more than I do. I really have no idea, not a clue. I blow my brains out trying to get this whole book written in 6 months, flat, okay, from writing the book and doing all the research, that I've never looked back. And so in a certain way, you guys know the answer to a question that ended my book better than I do, which is, could it happen again? And my answer to that has always been, it absolutely could happen again. But in the light of the Lawrence, this is just my view, in light of the Lawrence experience, that it wouldn't be as easy, not as easy. My book became in addition to being, it got well reviewed in the New York Times. Otherwise, it was the most stolen book in the St. Johnsbury Correctional Center. They could not keep the book. They asked me to come down and see him. The people at I forget the library. What's the name of the library in Montpelier? Anybody know the Montpelier Library? Whatever.
Hubbard.
Whatever. It's the Montpelier Library, right on Main Street. Okay. They brought me down there once, and they said, "Could you help us out?" And I said, "I don't know. What's your problem?" He says, we can't keep your book." I said, "Why not? They steal it." Anyway, I said, so I hate it when people ask me if I can do something. I haven't the faintest idea how to do it. I don't know what am I supposed to do? I mean, stand at the door? I mean, how am I? So anyway, in any event, they ran out of the book. You couldn't borrow it at the Montpelier Library, and they refused to buy. They probably bought 20 or something. They refused to buy any more. Anyway, so that is how the book. That is how the book happened. What I'm hoping is that your questions about it will be able to elicit what really might be on your mind. The only other thing I would say is that I think is a little bit beyond the book and so forth, but I'll just take the last couple minutes before I go to questions to just say, here's what's still there for me. The situation that ensued when this book was written in the 1970s, when and right about that time, I was in I worked for a while when I was in Providence. I was a Washington bureau chief, and I worked in something called the National Press Building. The National Press Building was on 16th Street, which, if you know the district, runs due north and south through the district, and Pennsylvania. That's the Pennsylvania Avenue and 16th. That's the dead center of the District of Columbia. And in that building, 9 stories, were at least 500 reporters, some of the finest 500 best reporters on the planet. Okay, and they were all out there every day, pounding it. And the result of that was, papers like, I had a tiny bureau. I had 2. That was just me and a guy named Doug Wilson. Although we were the first paper to break the fact that Nixon was going to resign. Okay, newspaper reporters care about that stuff. Who got that first? Anyway. So in any event, the big newspapers, the Baltimore Sun. The New York Times, of course, was huge, and so was the Wall Street Journal. But even stuff you don't really think about anymore. Indianapolis, Milwaukee Journal, the Miami Herald, the Atlanta Constitution, the Arkansas Gazette, okay, the San Diego Union, the Portland Oregonian, the Seattle Intelligencer, okay, the Boston Globe, okay. This whole structure now is gone, and what we have now is it's my lament for the golden era of my youth, okay, is it's now very difficult, and everybody now, not just St. Albans, but everybody in the country is experiencing this now. It is really on information. It is terribly difficult now to separate the signal from the noise. If you want to say what is Joe Biden going to do about China, and how are we supposed to do with this guy that's running Russia, and should we keep staying with Ukraine, and what are we going to do about cities that are becoming unlivable because there's drug addicts all over the place, and there's, if you go to Portland, probably not many people here go to Portland, but Portland, Oregon, what I do. There's whole areas of the city that are just tents and drug addicts and you name it, okay? In fact, there's a piece that was written, what is today, Thursday? Yesterday, 7 days, okay? Paula Routley's story about, okay, you go to Burlington, they're shooting up. Drove down Union Street in Burlington yesterday, and that's the first time I've seen it, right by the old, municipal auditorium. That we got a tent city. Yeah. We got a Burlington tent city. I think you guys don't have a tent city. Way to go. Don't get one. Okay. And so in any event, it's really hard now. It's a different world. And it's very hard and you have to work at it. If you want to really figure out what's going on, you can do that. Okay, but you have to work at it. You have to read 10 tons of garbage, okay, for every ton of worthwhile material that you can find. At least 10 to 1, and maybe 30 to 1. So now one of the things is, so anyway, in St. Albans, one of the things I wanted to say while I'm up here, I don't think he's here. Maybe he is. I'm so much older now I don't recognize him. But one of the things that happens is it's still here, and he's still out there, and I suspect you guys know it. There's a guy named Emerson Lynn, who used to run the Montpelier, the St. Albans Messenger. We call it the Mess in the biz, okay? But and so I was telling my wife when we're driving up here today. Now, Lynn is retired. He's not as old as I am, but he's probably pretty old. But he will occasionally just write something in the St. Albans Messenger. Maybe I don't know, what is it, once or twice a year? Now, I can tell you that I'm writing a book now that is killing me, okay? It's about healthcare reform in Vermont, okay? That's what I'm writing every day, okay? And I can tell you, when Emerson Lynn writes a thing, and I'm still a journalist, that's what I really am. And so I've got networks of people that I know, information sources. Emerson Lynn writes something that appears at 8 o'clock in the morning, okay? And every one of my networks lights up. I hear about it. If Emerson Lynn writes something, I don't read the St. Albans Mess. I just don't. I don't read every little newspaper. But you're seeing that is value. That's valuable. I mean, you're getting Emerson. I don't always agree with Emerson. I think he's wrong about he's been wrong about a few things. But he's a serious journalist, and I'm just telling you that. So when you're looking at it and you're reading what passes now for some journalism, it's just simply, not that much. Anyway, so listen, that is, I'm over my 40 minutes. So thank you very much. But now I want to hear from you. What do you guys think? How are you doing? And let me start with Linda.
I just wondered, what resistance, I know that as kids, I'll talk to you, but what resistance you met?
The
And-
resistance I got trying to do this,
Yeah, trying to interview.
basically,
people who-
Linda, the resistance here is what I would have predicted. As I say, I covered all, what was it? 6 years of the Nixon administration. Now, let me just tell you, you want resistance? The Vermont, you think the Vermont resistance stacks up to Nixon's guys? Are you kidding? Okay, that was hard. Okay, it was much easier here. Now, what you can do is the resistance. If you wanted to take this book, if Linda wanted to take this book and say and read every page, okay, and then see every page in here and take all the players, just make a list of them, all the characters. There's Mike McGinn, and there's Kim Cheney, and there's Jerry Diamond, and there's Tom Salmon, and there's this guy and that guy and the other guy, and there's whatever, okay? If you look at the quality, if you look at the people who never got it right, or on the side of the spectrum really, that just got it all wrong. And it was, and some got it wrong by accident, some got it wrong because they were just nasty people, okay? And if anybody thinks there aren't any nasty people out there, then you're living in a cave. I mean, look around. There's nasty people all over the place. And so, in any event, you can literally map, okay? You can literally map the degree of resistance by how nasty they were. It's almost like R equals N. I know that's kind of simple-minded, and I'm sorry about that, but that's the way I think it is. If my chances to talk to Judge Gregg were 0. My chances to talk to Lawrence were 0. My chances, when I need my most reliable sources were the easiest, but that can be a trap. Okay, so I've got somebody out there like I've now got Kim Cheney talking to me. I've got Jim Levy. He'll tell me anything I need to know. He'll just tell me. But that can be a trap, because what you can't do is you can't just print the material that's easy to get. Okay, irrespective of how important it is. Okay, you have to get everything you can get. And so mostly what I was able to get, when I got through with St. Albans, when I got through with this book, which was 6 months, well, start to finish, boom, and I didn't go back to it until last week. What I believed then, and I believe now, I believe today, I think I got St. Albans. I got enough out of St. Albans. I'm not saying I got it all. I'm not saying there's not people out there, whether it's Jim Levy or Randy Brock or Linda or somebody else that was here and got, et cetera, et cetera. And so the resistance really is the resistance you would expect. And what that's happening to today, and it's become even more difficult today. For example, I'm a political guy. I've been a political guy since I was in the fourth grade, okay? That was when Harry Truman was running, and he was sure to lose to Dewey, okay? But I was involved. I was in the fourth grade, and here's what we said. Truman's in the White House, waiting to get elected. Dewey's in the garbage can, waiting to get elected. That mesmerized Nelson Place School. Okay, so the resistance is simply what you would get, and if you want, but today it is much worse. It is now perfectly acceptable for people to not answer questions from legitimate press. The mainstream media, all of that. And if you want to see an outstanding example, now, a guy who's made a religion out of it is Ron DeSantis. Governor of Florida, the guy trying to beat Trump, he's going to lose. But his strategy is don't talk to him. And that is happening, that's happening all over the country. It's now a very common, especially in this polarized environment, it's very common for people to say, no, I'm not going to answer the questions. But so the resistance, Linda, was to me pretty much normal. I knew I had the same kind. I could, here's an example of how bad it was at the Nixon administration. The 1972 presidential campaign. Okay, Nixon's going to run against McGovern. Okay, so Nixon, we're in Miami Beach. Okay, and when you're covering it, it's crazy. A political convention, a nominating convention. It's nuts. Nobody sleeps. Okay, it just people are desperately trying to catch up to and everything is fast moving. Okay, and so anyway, the culmination of everybody knew Nixon was going to run again, so that mystery is over. But the interesting question was, what's he going to say? What's he going to say in his renomination address? What's he going to say? Because he's got to come out, balloons and stuff, and waving his arms, and he's going to make a big speech at about 10 o'clock at night. Okay. Anyway, so there it is. Now, what's happening? The speech starts at 10 o'clock at night. But for newspaper guys in those days, most of their deadlines are around 11, anywhere from 11 p.m. Some of them are earlier than that. The New York Times deadline for the night, for the next days, for that is about 8 o'clock the previous night. That's why all the main New York Times stories, they don't have anything the night before, because that paper's coming up here. If you lived in Manhattan, you'd get the story because they could handle it at 3 o'clock. But at 11 o'clock, there's nothing there. So anyway, so here is maybe 1,000 packed in a big stadium, 1,000 to 1,500 reporters, okay, all having to write, having every one of their papers for the next morning has got a hole that you could drive a truck through. That's for the Nixon speech. And so everybody is out there, they get it 7 o'clock at night, everybody's ready, everybody's had something to eat, okay? They're tired from 3 days, but they're ready, okay, and they're gonna get the text of the speech, right? That's always that's always happened. Everybody, you just get the text, and then you can write it there, you can put it there, and you're fine. It's no professional, that's like ice cream, it's very easy. No text. What? No text. Nixon and Ron Ziegler. Anybody remember that name? Ron Ziegler was a blue nasty, okay? And Nixon and Ziegler and all his people, they hated the press. They hated them, okay? And so we didn't have the thing. So it was the toughest thing I ever did in my life. Much harder than this book or the book I'm killing myself trying to write now, okay? My paper has got what's called a steam bed deadline. This is in Providence. They got a steam bed deadline of midnight. That's it. Okay, and there's 75 trucks. They're ready to go. Their engines are running. They've got to have they've got to have that paper done. So Nixon's out, comes out 10 o'clock. Oh my God! So I've got an intern with me. He's standing right next to over my shoulder. I tell him at 7 o'clock, you call Providence right now. You get a open telephone line, and you don't let that telephone line get away for a second. You've got it, okay? And so Nixon comes out. He's starting to speak, and I'm listening. I have to write it. I got to listen and write, and I got that deadline there. And what's happening is I write the first paragraph, the second paragraph, the third paragraph. This guy on my shoulder, he's just looking over he's reading it. He's reading it into Providence, okay? So he's reading it to a dictation person. The dictation person turning it into print, okay? Sending it to the editors, goes to the copy desk, goes from the copy desk to the press room, and goes into hard lead and putting big things on the press. Anyway, we got it. But that's really hard. The Nixon blue nasties, the Nixon, the St. Albans, Vermont Blue Nasties were no match for the Nixon, and in point of fact, they didn't bother me at all. Anyway, I hope that helped. Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a question.
Yeah,
How'd you get the information about my old man here?
I'm sorry.
How'd you get the information about Randy Brock?
But, well, because he's been a player, you know, for many, many years, and I remember, I remember doing a story, he's in the book, he was knowledgeable about, he was not, because he has been a, what do you call it?
Security person?
What do you call it?
Polygraph?
Yeah, he's a polygraph guy, and so he's in the book. How did I get it?
Yes, how'd you get the info with his involvement with Paul Lawrence and St. Albans?
I have no idea.
I gave it to you. Yeah.
I got the answer, and you got the answer.
Yeah, listen, this is a thing that doesn't exist anymore, real serious journalism. What you do is you dig for every single piece of information that you have. There was nothing complicated about what Randy Brock had. It was simple enough, you know, and so what you do is.
I don't agree, but okay.
Well, okay, so, and the thing is, I'm not making any claims. It took me 6 months to do this, and I did the best I could, and in fact, there are some errors in here. You think I'm telling you any of them? No. Now, could there be some, can you disagree with emphasis? Can you, whatever, sure, and I'm listening to it. But that's what you do. If you put it this way, I certainly did this book on it. But what I would do is show me anybody to beat it.
You talked about the power of the press.
I'm sorry.
You talked about the power of the press in those days. You know, don't you think that power of the press might have contributed to the hysteria surrounding the whole cases?
You know, I'm really good. Donna, I can't hear well.
Oh, sorry. You talked about the power of the press in those days. You know,
The power of the press is
But don't
gone.
you think that fueled some of the hysteria? The press was not being skeptical of these claims, so don't you think that contributed?
Right, the press is not
power?
completely gone, but position is the only people that have lower favorability ratings these days are the lamestream media, drug dealers, whatever. I mean, it's or you know, some politicians. Anyway. Yes, sir. Back in the orange.
Yeah, hi. My name is Dan, and I'm sorry to walk in late. I missed your opening. I'm not sure what how you presented the presentation, how it started. I was a player in the role here. I'm in the book. You mentioned some nasty people.
I need somebody to translate that. I'm a really old. I can't hear. But just go ahead. So I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Sure. My name is Dan Thompson. Dan Thompson.
Okay.
And I was a player, and I'm in your book. I was just a low-level player in your book.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to miss your opening. I'm not sure how you started your presentation. But you mentioned some nasty people in St. Albans at first, which there was definitely some nasty people in St. Albans at the time of when this all started.
Yep.
Just to mention a couple, Keith Campbell, who used to be a realtor.
Yeah, I know. He's in the book. Yep.
All right, exactly.
He's definitely an N.
He was a town selectman, one of the fathers of the town, and I believe he started the whole process. He did not like to see the long hairs, the hippie across the park in Taylor Park, drinking their quarts of beer, smoking their weed, Also, there was the bar, Tuner's Bar,
Yeah.
that was right next to his, in,
Peters,
his,
I think, was amazing. Where was,
It's right on Main Street.
where was his bar?
Tuner's was right next to Keith Campbell's office. Keith Campbell was the realtor,
Yeah,
and Tuner's was right next to it.
yeah.
Otto had the bar.
And Otto Kramer had the bar.
I used to know that, you know, but that was 50 years ago.
Okay, so right around the corner was a candle shop called Sandcastles. A
Right.
fellow named Sonny Cross owned Sandcastles.
Linda was there.
Okay. And I was sort of a partner with Sonny Cross. Anyway, my question, leading up to my question, there was a lot of nasty people in town. I believe wholeheartedly that Keith Campbell was the one that started this process to eradicate the long-haired people that used to hang out in Taylor Park and just, he didn't like it.
Yep,
Didn't like it.
yep.
I believe, in my opinion, he went to the other selectmen, the powers that be, whoever they were back then. It's been 50 years exactly. I'm not sure who they were then. And they instrumented this formula, this plan to eradicate the degenerates, as they called them back then, the long-haired hippies. Let's get them out of St. Albans. We don't like them. We don't need them here. So what can you do about it? Well, as you said in your book, they hired this low-life police officer that got fired from where he was down in Connecticut or something. They hired him to come up here to do undercover work, to arrest people, charge them, and put them in jail. All right, so that happened. They hired this dude, Paul Lawrence. I read your book many times. I tried to find it in the St. Albans Library, but like you said, it's stolen. They won't ever get another copy. So
Donna is the book genius, and I have not had a hard copy of the book myself. Okay, for 30 years.
I'm not
But
surprised.
she got me one.
Yep.
I'm not surprised. I'll
We have-
have one before I leave.
We have paperback copies back there. New England Press reprinted it several years ago, and before they closed, I bought most of what they had because it's St. Albans. It's an important part of history.
Absolutely, it is. It's part of history, part of my history, part of the people that I grew up with and lived with. It's our history. 148 people arrested for falsely accused of drug charges. It happened here. My question to you is, what prompted you to write this book? And what possession, why did you?
That wasn't the first part of it, but I just tell you again, what happened was that the fact of Lawrence, I mean the basic fact, corrupted all of these people, that appeared in 19, I think it was either 1974 or 1975, 74 I believe.
That's right.
It appeared on the front page of the New York Times.
It did.
Okay, and then what happened was, as it said, was just a pure accident. I was working at the New York Bureau. I was the New York bureau chief for Gannett News Service, and the story's a little longer, but the long and the short of it is, I got a call from a literary agent, okay, who asked me if I would write a book on the story that had appeared in the New York Times. At the time, I knew nothing about it except that what I knew from the Times.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did, so on the basis of that, of reading, a book agent called me and asked me to write, if I would write a book. I said, I'll give it a shot. I didn't know how to do it. And they told me about it. He said, yeah, I had to write a treatment. I wrote the treatment. And then I had a contract, $5,000 for a year's work. I had a contract with Crown Publishers the next day. That's how it started. And it was an accident. I mean, it was just, this guy, this literary agent, a guy named Louis Chambers, he's probably long gone now, this is years ago. He was a literary agent in New York, but he was from Vermont, someplace down in eastern Vermont somewhere. And he saw this story in the New York Times, and that's what literary agents do. Literary agents constantly scan the world looking for something that might turn into a book. Then they take the book, they see that, they get somebody to write the book, and then the guy gets a contract for, let's say, whatever number of dollars it is, and then the agent gets 10%. That's how they look. That's how it works. That's how it happened.
That's what prompted you to write the book. Well,
And so I just, I was wanted to, it was just, otherwise I had, at the time, it wasn't that I was bored. I mean, the fact of the matter was, New York City was going broke. I spent a day working as a garbage man in Hunts Point, New York. I mean, so it was luck, and that's the way it went down.
Any last quick questions? I know Hamilton has a wife impatiently awaiting him for a dinner reservation.
okay.
Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask quickly before he has to be on his way?
Walk across the street.
Yes, well, down to Drake, so it's a little bit further.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for coming.
And I appreciate it.
We're having a panel discussion on October 24th with Randy Rock and James Levy and Jason Barney and hopefully some other people to discuss this issue further. So keep your eyes open. We'll have a Facebook event up tomorrow.
Thank you.